Welcome to Business Club to Adapt and Overcome. I'm here. We have a special keynote speaker, Brett Wilson. So Brett Wilson is best known as Dragon Emeritus from 3 seasons on CBC's hit reality TV show Dragon's Den. He has built extensive holdings in power generation, hydrocarbon production, real estate development, cannabis, agriculture, sports, and entertainment industries. His business and philanthropic leadership have brought in considerable recognition, including the Order of Canada in 2011 and the Saskatchewan Order of Merit in 2012. Brett continues to simplify and organize his life to focus on what is most important: his family, his friends, and his health. His semi-autobiography, Redefining Success, Still Making Mistakes, is an all-time best-selling business book in Canada. So please welcome Brett Wilson, father, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Welcome, Brett. Great to have you with us today.
Glad to be along. Glad to see the world of entrepreneurship alive and well everywhere.
That's excellent. So, Brett, I saw another. Well, first of all, let me say you're my favorite dragons of the Dragon's Den. I was a huge fan of yours, and because you had very heart-centered philosophy as being like an angel investor, and I love seeing like the contrast with you, and the other dragons too. That was amazing to see. So what have you learned from your experience on Dragon's Den as far as what for investing in business? What do you look for from those presenters to know what to invest in?
Well, let's tell a few stories, if you will, out of Dragon's Den time. I had a lot of fun on the show, don't get me wrong, but let's remember it's an edited, managed, encouraged show. And when I say edited, there's a lot of things I said that might have been rough or tough that got edited. And there was times that Kevin O'Leary was nice, and those got edited as well. So it was done for television. And remember that nobody ever does a deal first and then does their homework. You do your homework and then you try and cut a deal. So it was kind of, the show was set up to be the reverse. I made fun at times of the dragons who said, I don't want to invest in you because you have no sales. Well, there are no sales in a startup. So why would you be listening to a startup pitch if sales was so important? So there was some inconsistencies, if you will, but as much as I criticize the dragons and make fun of some of the collective efforts of the dragons to actually get deals closed, I do celebrate Dragon's Den above all for celebrating the spirit of entrepreneurship and causing a whole nation to think more about the fact that being an entrepreneur is a legitimate outcome. I often challenge people at university in terms of their career paths. One of the great foundations, if you will, for an entrepreneurial experience is education. And I don't care whether it's trades or professional or a general arts degree. Having a bit of the seeds of entrepreneurship planted inside the individuals is invaluable in terms of changing the way people perceive the future and the options that are in front of them. So for me, Dragon's Den celebrated entrepreneurship, exploded my profile, not necessarily correctly. Again, just because television was popular, I still remember Carrie Underwood telling me that I was her favorite dragon. Whoa, what's Carrie Underwood doing? Well, she's visiting family in Canada and they're watching Dragon's Den. So just the craziest moments came out of that show, but celebrating entrepreneurship is probably for me the highlight of the show.
No, that's excellent. Now, one thing as being an entrepreneur has many ups and downs, and you've actually been very vocal with your own struggles with both cancer. You have actually had 2 bouts of cancer and also mental health. And similar to myself, you struggle a little bit with bipolar as well. And I want to ask you, like, what have you learned and what can you share for those entrepreneurs who are struggling right now? What can you share with them on strategies to overcome those challenges and those obstacles?
Well, maybe just to pivot a little bit, in this world where cancel culture attacks you for saying it's Tuesday when they see your tweet on Wednesday and they say you don't even know the days of the week. Well, again, you get some of the most vile and inane commentary. And I guess my coaching moment here is learn to ignore it. Learn not to take any of the feedback personally. Absorb what you can if there's a learning. If you've said something, done something, proposed something that on reflection you want to change your mind, well, change your mind. But don't spend your life trying to pivot or don't try and pivot your life trying to appease, if you will, the extremes. And the extreme left, the extreme right are both extremes that just have no interest in me. So that's probably the biggest thing for me is learning how to adapt to the ever-changing challenges. Understanding how social media works is important. Being in social media is not important. Again, if your competitors and your staff and your clients are all active on social media, you better know how that dialogue's going. You better know how they're interacting. Even if you choose as a business or a person not to be active in social media, everyone, virtually every business now has some sort of an online presence, whether it's a Facebook page or a mini website of some sort. Everyone has a landing page of basic information. And so understanding how social media integrates the businesses that we run, without getting into the businesses, whether it's services or products, understanding social media, understanding the essence of marketing is your point of differentiation.
Mhm. Excellent. So, the last 15 months, small business has really struggled because of this pandemic. And what would you say has changed now? I mean, we obviously know more of a work from home environment, but here I see you actually opening up a restaurant, which is counter to what most people would see as a good business choice. But I mean, you obviously saw the opportunity, and how has business changed, and how what's that going to look like moving forward?
I think we're in the advanced stages of recovery now, and I've always been a bit of a skeptic over the government's rollout of masking and distancing and lockdowns and vaccine procurement and vaccine delivery. So I'm a bit of a cynic on all of that. But at the end of the day, I vote Canadian. And so I wore a mask for the benefit of others. I kept my distance for the benefit of others. I got vaccinated for the benefit of others. And I kept my businesses going for the benefit of others and me. And there's no question it's been challenging. I'm cynical about the thought that I see some people saying that downtown big cities will never recover. And I completely disagree. I think that it's very difficult to advance one's career working from home. You cannot do by Zoom what you can do in the coffee shop, and the integration, the interaction, the interplay between staff and people. We've kept our office open. You can see behind me is my team. We're in an open office environment. For 15 months, we've been very, very respectful of wash your hands, sanitize, keep your distance, wear a mask at times when we were walking around when the COVID variant was bubbling. But we have kept our office operating and we haven't had a problem. And I had COVID. I didn't, I didn't suffer other than fatigue, but away we go. So biggest point is that I think the recovery is upon us, and how do we work together to recover in terms of our economy and the businesses? I'm extremely frustrated by the extremes, the always lockdown extreme left, the never lockdown extreme right. And obviously the answer lay in the middle, which was get vaccinated, keep the hospitals available. And I think we did a terrible job of protecting the elderly. But again, here we are. We're in
Well,
recovery.
and that's obviously something that's changing now, obviously, because if you're elderly and thinking of retiring in an old age home is not as appealing as it used to be,
No.
right? So definitely it was a wake up call, for a lot of issues there. So speaking of what's coming up, this summit is all about innovation strategies moving forward. So what future opportunities do you see in business? For example, I mean, what kind of companies would you invest in yourself these days moving forward?
Well, we're still investing in the cannabis space, in the real estate space. I've got this restaurant, and so we're looking at expanding the restaurant already, and it hasn't even opened. So we're pretty optimistic. I'm building a power plant, expanding a power plant. So it still comes down to trade, services, products, and call it innovation around what consumers, people want. And I'm a huge fan of believing that as the economy recovers, the restaurants, the restaurants absolutely going nuts. But as the economy recovers, power is necessary. And as much as you can find people saying that the pandemic was the end of the fossil fuel industry, we are now at record demand and record production. So to suggest that there's an end, can we evolve? Can the world take care of itself better? I happen to think that the two issues the world needs to deal with are not climate change and other issues related to that, but pollution and population. Those are the two P's are our biggest problem. We are overpopulating parts of the world and it makes no sense. And it's the elephant in the room. Can't really talk about how do you limit the growth of populations. Immigration is a result of, overstimulation in terms of the growth of the population. But my biggest worry is pollution. As much as we're attacking people who make plastic, the people that dump plastic in the ocean are the people that are at harm, that are harming the planet, not those who make the plastic. The recycling tools, all of the things that we could do. And again, the hypocrisy of some of the extremes. North Face the other day refusing to supply jackets to an oil and gas company as they were buying bulk. And then, of course, the oil and gas company, or pardon me, someone came back and pointed out to North Face that something like 90% of their products rely on the fossil fuel industry. So there's some hypocrisy there. For me, it's the thoughtful understanding and education of our population and our customers. And I'm a huge fan of what lies ahead. And by the way, in terms of businesses still to invest in, if I was your age, full of piss and vinegar, I'd be chasing probably something like electric vehicles, electric two-wheel and three-wheel vehicles, not cars, but bicycles, scooters, tricycles, kids' bikes. The advent of electricity with batteries is real, and I'm a huge fan of it. And I'm actually, and the reason I'm thinking of that is this weekend I was invited into an electric bike manufacturing business, and tempting, very tempting.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and similar to yourself, I have an investment banking background too. So it's really interesting with the the energy, and I remember meeting with a fund manager, Dina DeGear, and she was talking about one of her reasons she wasn't investing in energy was just because of the growth of the electric vehicles, and thinking 5 years down the road, because that's such a huge component of the energy sector is on recreational vehicles. But I've heard on the other side of the argument, providing that the chargers and all the infrastructure that would be needed for electric powered vehicles is also we're far away from that as well. So do you think it's moving forward, like 5-10 years from now, do you think the energy sector is still going to be able to persevere?
Well, there's little doubt that the fossil fuel, call it energy industry, will continue, because we're not taking away many of the prime consumers. We're not even close to shifting long haul. We're not even close to shifting trains. We're not even close to shifting airplanes out of the consumption of fossil fuels. And they're becoming increasingly efficient. And again, without even questioning and debating the science of climate change and whether CO2 and trace gases are the issue, the future of energy is a combination of many. We don't have the capacity, the wires, in terms of capacity, to charge every vehicle. That if every car today was electric, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the grid to distribute the power. We don't even have the capacity in most of the markets to supply the power that's needed. So there's an element of that that's not ever talked about or thought about. We have to upgrade the entire wire system. We cannot physically tear up downtown Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, doesn't matter. We can't tear them up to put larger cables down so that they could then charge cars overnight in their shopping, in their parkades. There's a lot of challenges that haven't really been thought through. I have a friend who has an electric car, and he says, "Oh yeah, I love driving to Edmonton. It's no problem." And get chatting with him, and it turns out he has to stop for half an hour halfway. Then he has to find a charging station when he gets there. Then he has to find a charging station before he leaves. Then he has to find a charging station on the way back because he can only make it halfway. And he says, "Oh yeah, that's no problem." I struggle with that. That's not the way I would approach it. And I'm
And I
very
think that the
comfortable with
hybrid solution is probably the most practical solution, kind of like a version that's halfway between. You utilize electric, but you also have the fossil as the energy to as the backup. So having a combination of the two, I think, is probably
10 times out of 10. I think that the fossil fuel world is, or pardon me, the hybrid world is the way we're going to play this game. Absolutely.
Exactly. So Brett, you have a best-selling book. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your new book, and also let us know how we can find that.
Well, we can certainly ship a couple copies down. It's actually been out for quite a while. I'm the only dragon who wrote one book, and Kevin had 6 or 7. Arlene's got 3 or 4.
The Cold Hard Truth, I got that one.
Yeah. So the good news is I outsold them in terms of total sales of any one book. and it was well received. The title of the book is called Redefining Success. The real title, when I was talking to the publisher, was Redefining Success in a Wealth Obsessed World. And it's that whole thought that, and people will challenge me and say, well, no, I don't think of success as just money. Well, but that's the first thing people talk about. And it's whether it's the size of your car, the size of your holiday, the size of your office, the size of your home, size of your wallet. The success typically is based on, call it the metrics of superficial consumption. And it was one of my daughters who said once when I was doing some talks, she said, why don't you ever define success by the size of the smile? In other words, the happiness quotient. And so the essence of the book is talking a bit about redefining success, the idea that success is based on your personal joy, your personal satisfaction, your relationships, and then rethinking, if you will, what the priorities are in your life. If your priority is to have a big car and a big office and a big wallet, then abandon everything else and go for it. But remember, when you abandon everything else, and everything else could be family, could be your pet dog, could be your health, could be things that really do matter. But in that shallow and superficial pursuit of wealth, you lose. So it's 3 steps forward and 5 steps back. The book is also subtitled, pardon me, Still Making Mistakes, which is another, if you will, in the essence of honest and open and transparent conversation. Do I still make mistakes? Yep, pretty well every day. Today's gone quite well, but it's only 9 o'clock for me right now.
Yeah, good for you. That's amazing. So you mentioned you're a passionate Canadian, and one of the biggest things that we happened recently was discovering of the Indigenous bodies in one of the schools, and obviously reopened this kind of like, it's like Canada's Black Lives Matter, right? In a way, the Indigenous
Yep.
issues. And what are your thoughts on because then the opposite, the thing about tearing down these previous prime ministers and these statues and all that, it opens up. So what do you think the solution is moving forward, and interested to get your thoughts on on Indigenous issues in Canada?
Certainly. I work very closely with 4 bands up in the Yukon. I'm a large investor in a company that's probably the largest real estate play in the Yukon. Have some extraordinary partners there. I've been involved with 7 now First Nations in the North Battleford area, which is my hometown where I grew up. And it was a hotbed of hostility between white and First Nations when the Bushy-Stanley trial came along a number of years ago. One of the things we have to think a bit about in all of this is how do we move forward? I sometimes struggle with the word reconciliation, and not because it's not well intended or well meaning, but it doesn't have an end. It doesn't have a definable way of reaching a conclusion. And so I've spoken in front of Aboriginal groups, and I'll do it again many times. I challenge the word reconciliation when we don't know what it means, when we don't know how do we resolve and tick the box that says, okay, now we're reconciled. I'm more about moving forward. How do we work together as we move forward? How do we do better than we did in the past? The residential schools, they were well intended at the time, terrible with the benefit of hindsight, but they thought they were doing the right thing. Whoever was involved. I can't for a moment defend the outcome, not for a moment, but it was intended to grow the country. But we can do better, and we can do a lot better. And that's really what I'm talking about, is the Black Lives Matters and its marches has proven to be a fairly hypocritical group in terms of protecting their own interests and no one else's. We have people of every color, every race, every gender. As we expand the gender options for people to consider as they go forward, we've got so many things we need to work on together, and most people focus on just their cause. I got challenged the other day on one of the companies I'm involved with because we didn't have gender diversity on our board. Well, we didn't have gender diversity, but we had age diversity, we had experience diversity, we had geographic diversity, we had all sorts of experience and skills and talents that were valuable to the board. And so the thought that bringing on a woman just for the sake of having a woman, as opposed to integrating it into age diversity and therefore experience diversity, geographic diversity in terms of where do they live, work, and play relative to the business we're running, seems somewhat contrite and superficial. So going back though, in the First Nations world, most of the First Nations I'm close to understand the need for transparency and communication within their own bands. And then between bands, there's still a great deal of animosity and hostility. And so it's really hard for the over 600 distinct First Nations in Canada to come together under a unified voice when they band by band have the fighting that they do. Then there's the infighting within the bands. And we watch from the outside, hoping we could help. I don't understand for a moment why we don't have fresh water on I'm a civil engineer by training. Having fresh water treatment plants can be built modular. They could be helicoptered into anywhere. So there's a lot of things that could have been done better. The question is, what do we do better going forward? And that's where I celebrate the opportunities. I'm co-invested in the Yukon. We're looking at opportunities to work together in the Battlefords, and I'm actually in discussions with the Métis settlements of Alberta to do a deal, whatever that means. So actively engaged with moving forward. I feel like the word reconciliation is about the past, and I'm not saying that we don't mourn the past. I'm a huge fan of keeping Canada Day alive and well. And whether you celebrate on Canada Day or you mourn on Canada Day, those are your choices. But take the day to think about how we can make Confederation and therefore Canada better. Canceling makes no sense at all.
Mm. No, there's so much truth to that. So Brett, what's next for you now that moving forward? I mean, you mentioned you have a restaurant business coming up. What's up next for you? Are you involved in any technology investments or any other areas that's an interest to you?
Well, my son, who works for me full time, is finding new products and services and adventures regularly in the worlds of technology and cannabis. So we've got dozens and dozens of new investments every year in that space, but it doesn't take away from what I do. And my major efforts are a couple of large real estate projects that I'm developing on raw land, expanding a power plant that we built from scratch a couple of years ago. And this restaurant is so much more than a restaurant. It's an entertainment venue, and it's about to open thanks to the end of COVID in terms of 70% of the population vaccinated, et cetera. So those are sort of the priorities for me. The other thing is that post-COVID, I'd like to get back on airplanes. I normally travel every second week. So I have a week in Calgary and a week away. And my week away is anywhere in the world. And I'm anxious to get back to that.
Yeah, and that was, speaking of the airplane industry, that was one of the first recommendations I had, was a company that was affiliated, CAE was affiliated with the airplane industry, because they took like a 70% hit. So I mean, there's huge opportunities, that are becoming available as this, change. And you always look back into, in like the Depression, how many millionaires were made, right? Because they did the right thing, like Leo Fender Guitars, like that's where he started his business.
Yes.
So many opportunities out of transition. So if someone was starting a new business, and what would you say? What would you recommend if they were gonna, if you had $1 million to invest in a business? What do you think would what business would you invest in?
That's one of the toughest questions imaginable, and I like it. I'm a huge fan of the service industry, and the service industry looking after an aging population. So I wouldn't hesitate to play in that space. We talked a little bit about the non-four-wheel electric industries. There's many of them. I think the most important thing that a lot of entrepreneurs overlook is understanding the benefit and the power of the marketing, and understanding who your competition is, how big the market is that you really want to chase. I've heard people talk about, well, there's 10 million dogs in Canada, and if I can just get 1% of that market, I can sell a lot of leashes. Well, the cost of accessing that market might be punitive to the you call it the margin that's available from those leashes. So understanding the market, understanding how to penetrate the market, understanding the competition in the market. Lots of people say, well, if I build it, they will come. If I offer the service, they will come. Yeah, maybe. Understanding who your competition is. And I've heard so many people say, well, we're the only one in the world. Understood. You might be the only one doing exactly what you're doing, but the end consumer might have other ways of achieving the end goal that you think you're going to satisfy. So it's a matter of understanding both the consumer and the competition in terms of the space that you're going into. You know, thousands of companies make sofas. I could start a company making sofas, but I got to be ready to take on 1,000 companies, not just find one customer. I got to find 1,000 companies in Canada who are trying to chase that customer. So it's a better understanding of the market, I would say, is probably one of the most important things for early stage entrepreneurs.
You got to make sure that people want what you're selling, right? That they have to do a market analysis there. So this has been fantastic, Brett. So grateful to have you with us today, and I want to thank you again for for sharing your thoughts and your insights with us today. And we'll share in our chat too, where a link that people can get your book and check it out there. Any final thoughts you want to share with us today?
Just that I celebrate Confederation, I celebrate Canada, and I celebrate the return of the economy, and hopefully we can bring this whole country back together again and stop focusing on the extremes of social media. Let's do this.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brett.
No, appreciate it.